Yeah. All right. G'day. For those that don't know me, I'm Dave. No, that's not a picture of me. So we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy. So this, I guess, the germ behind this talk, I guess, was planted over a few different conversations I've had with many different people. The claim that I hear again and again is that somehow there are no ethical or moral implications in the actual process of coding. And I'm going to argue against this today. It's going to be pretty philosophy light, because I don't know anyone's background here. But what I'm trying to do is present here an argument. I'm going to put forward a couple of claims, expecting some pushback, so by all means jump in. But if I can establish, I guess, if I can convince you of these individual claims, it should be sufficient to get you to believe what I'm trying to say here in the conclusion. All right, so premise number one, politics is about power. When most people think about power, they typically think about something like this. This is what we might call hard power, the threat of violence, or the actual use of violence or incarceration. What? No, I know. That's not my wife. Yeah, but
really got in trouble.
Yeah, but hard power is not the only kind of power that we're talking about here. There's also soft power. So soft power might be things like diplomacy, cooperation, negotiation, persuasion. The general definition of power, though, here is the ability to realise one's own will or to achieve one's own objectives, despite what other people might want. So if you can get what you want, irrespective of what other people want, then you have power. So that's the kind of definition I'm working with here. All right, so now when people think of democracy, when they think about politics, they normally think about something like democracy. You might think about voting or political parties or the latest stupid thing Trump or Abbott has said. But of course, politics is much more than these kind of formal mechanisms. It's not just about democracy, it's about standing up for justice, it's about resistance, it's about subversion, it's about a lot of these kind of things. But it doesn't just happen on national scales or informal situations. We have politics at home, we have politics in the family, at the school, and we have politics in the office. So what we have here is whenever we have a situation that changes a power structure, changes what we might say the balance between winners and losers, we're engaging in politics. Okay? So whenever we're changing a power structure and altering the balance of winners, we're engaging in politics. So I guess the takeaway from this first part here is that any act that involves a change of power is itself a political act. And that was Act 1. So we're going to do this fast. Act 2. Software is eating the world. All right. So Mark Andreessen, how do you pronounce his name? Andreessen. Yeah, Andreessen. He had this this famous essay from about 2011 that software was eating the world. And while part of it was, I guess, a justification for the crazy kind of valuations that his firm was giving to these startup investments, there was a bit of merit to the argument here. So firstly, within existing industries, the use of software and technology is reshaping them, all right? It's making them more efficient. It's allowing them to do things better, faster, and most importantly, cheaply. But it is certainly changing the power dynamics within industries. But more importantly, it's software companies themselves, as opposed to, let's say, old school companies that are just using software. Software companies themselves are significantly changing industry. They're changing the economies. I mean, take a look at any of these, and they have disrupted. Uber's disrupted transportation, Airbnb, accommodation, Netflix, entertainment, Stripe, payments, Dropbox, sneaker nets, they're disrupted. But I mean, we just have to look at something like the MSCI, which is the World Stock Market Index, which is an amalgamation of, I think, about 90% of the developed world's stock markets. Out of the top 10 companies on this, most of them are technology firms. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet. These are firms that do not have the same kind of financial startup costs that things like ExxonMobil does, or JP Morgan, Johnson & Johnson, or Nestle. So what we're seeing here is for these kind of firms, they can change the nature of markets, they can change economies significantly. So the takeaway from here too is that software is eating the world. Alrighty, so I guess what, if software is eating the world, and that if you change a power structure, you're engaging in politics, then I think it's sufficient to show that these companies, at least these startups, are political actors. They are engaging in politics because they are changing the balance of winners and losers. Whether or not that's true for software developers themselves, though, I guess is a more challenging question here. But I want to think about this for a moment. Every time you write a lot of code, you seem to be doing something at least. You seem to be making an improvement, making something more efficient or more effective or faster or whatever. If you weren't making this change, what would be the point of the code? When Paul Graham talks about the 10 times programmer, he's not talking about 10 times 0 programmer. So we can say here that software developers themselves are changing the balance of winners and losers. And by that same token, it seems like whenever you write code, you are engaging in a political act because you are changing power structures through the code you write. So that's my takeaway number 3 here. Programming itself is a political act. You are changing the balance of powers, therefore you're engaging in politics. All right, but this is not meant to be a kind of preachy talk here, and there's no kind of prescriptive solutions about what should you do. But I do want it to raise, start the train of thought for a few questions here. These might be this, what is your obligation when writing code that could have bad outcomes? To make it more concrete, we'll pick a kind of topical example here, should you write code, when your manager says, I want you to write some code that queries a competitor's API in a way that breaches the terms of services there. Not necessarily illegal, but is it something that's ethically permissible? Is it something you should be doing? What if they asked you to, for example, write some code that allowed executives to find out what we might describe as, private information about particular journalists that were critical of our company in order to highlight where they've been going and what kind of things they've been doing when using our product? Is it morally permissible to write code that allows your company, your executives, to, for example, identify when government regulators are using your app, to block them from using your app, or even worse, sending out false information to users of your system that have been identified as government regulators? Now, there's going to be a trade-off here, and I guess a spectrum here between how much impact is the code you write. How much impact from the code you write will determine what kind of balance of power you're changing here, therefore what kind of a political act it is. There's also going to be a balance here, I guess, between how much of it is directly responsible how much is it directly responsible from my code versus the actions of the executives or management or other people that use my code. An analogy we might think about here is, if you're a manufacturer, working in the factory, pumping out items, there's a different kind of level of ethical implication if you're making knives versus if you're making guns versus if you're making nuclear weapons. Some of these things have multiple range of uses. They can be used for bad things, but they could also be used for good things. Other ones, though, seem to be exclusively used for harm. So the question I guess I want to leave people with here is, do you have any moral considerations when you write code? Should you be doing this? But the important thing I want you to all, I guess, consider here is that software development is not a value-free endeavor. It's easy to think that just because I'm typing on code, I'm just essentially engaging in applied mathematics or set or category theory, that, hey, that's objective, there's no ethical considerations in mathematics. But it's not so much what you're doing in terms of the theory, it's what kind of things that your code can produce. So while writing a test might be purely objective in that sense, it's just a sort of gates and Boolean logic and electrons flowing in particular directions here, what your code is used for is something that you should be thinking about. And again, I don't have all the answers, I don't have many answers tonight, in fact, about what is the right thing to do here, but this is the particular position that I want to convince you of. I've come across just in practice, but also in academia, a lot of people in computer science who truly believe that there are no ethical or moral considerations to the work that they're doing. Now, for some of you might be thinking that seems odd, and
all industries need psychopaths.
Yeah, well, they do, you know. But for those of you, I just want you to think about these kind of things, you know. Is the work you're doing making a difference in terms of the balance of power between winners and losers? If so, you're engaging in politics here. It may not be the type of politics you normally associate that word with, but it's politics the same. The other thing to think about here is this. You have more power, more political power as a software developer every day in front of your keyboard than you ever do in front of the ballot box. You can influence power relationships more through your keyboard than you can the ballot box. So if you accept the idea that putting a piece of paper and 1 to 5 or whatever on a piece of paper in a ballot box is a political act, and it also seems to be the case that writing code that changes power structures in society is also a political act. Well, that's pretty much all I have tonight in the short version before dinner. But are there any questions on that? Or more importantly, any disagreement? Yes?
Why?
Why? Why what?
So, why this topic? Why these points?
Why these points?
Seriously, where is this come from?
Yeah, no. Well, because in talking to developers or academics, I often come across this position that people truly believe that they work in essentially a value-free environment, that they have no ethical considerations about the type of code they write or the type of research that they're doing. And this, I guess, is my attempt to articulate why I think that's not the case.
I've been in another profession for 20 odd years, being in software. I'm a land surveyor, and it is a profession and not the cowboy thing that is software, because we have professional bodies that set ethics that have been developed.
Yep.
You can't call yourself, say, a licensed surveyor or whatever, because if you're not trading in those ethics, you don't get the license. So, like, I think you need to separate the idea of the code from what the business does. Like, so for me, like, if I write, a web server, I don't know whether it's going to be used to launch weapons or like emoticons, right? Like, it's just a web server, right? And I think it's a stretch to say that the code is the issue that I write. I think it's what it's applied to.
Oh, look, I certainly agree that the moral implications stem from the application of the code. But the point here, I guess, it's analogous to say, the scientists that worked on the Manhattan Project. We're not all coding here nuclear weapons, but it's an analogous situation here. What if the code could not be created without you, in a kind of counterfactual relationship here, then whatever action or outcome could not have occurred had you not written the code. Now, of course, you could say, well, if I hadn't written the code, somebody else might have. That's
the justification of 90% of Manhattan scientists.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a similar kind of thing. But I think what sets software development apart from, say, land surveying or a range of activities is just the scope that IT has in this current climate, in this last 20 years, of changing the nature of our society. The way that software has changed society is unrivaled, I think, if you look at the past 10,000 years.
Yeah, but societies have a choice, in some regards. So, like, for example, it doesn't happen in IT, but the reason that we have licensing professional bodies in surveying is because before that it was code.
Yeah, bad things were done. Yes.
Bad things were happening. So then they, everyone got together, and said, well, how do we do this? Well, let's regulate that, right? So then only regulate the people who do that. And that is true in many industries. If you've ever tried to, I don't know, put electrical devices in your home and take the PowerPoint, and like put some wires together, it's just pretty simple. You're breaking the law because you're not a qualified electrician.
Yeah.
So society has a choice, and it's just chosen not to do this. So society has chosen not to regulate. So like we have mechanisms. We've done it before.
Yeah. Well, see, I certainly agree that it hasn't happened in IT, even though there is like the Australian Computing Association or whatever. There is a kind of professional body Most computer science degrees don't include any kind of ethical training that all other regulated professions seem to do. But I kind of disagree with the point here that society's acting. You know, I don't think society really has agency in that kind of way that you're describing it there. It was a bunch of individual surveyors that got together and said, or it was pressure by other people that were the recipients of bad surveying or bad electrical work that made that happen, not society.
What is society? It's not people.
Well, society, you can argue, is just a collection of people, but whether or not it has agency in the sense that society is making decisions, no, it seems to be individual actors.
I think probably a better response would be that that if that is going to happen, it hasn't happened yet. Like you could just say we're still in the Wild West when it comes to software.
Oh yeah, and software development is
Right, like,
divided.
a very new profession.
But we're also getting very.
And I mean, software developers are software engineers, and yet they don't seem to have the same level of professional standards that, say, a civil engineer or an aviation engineer might have.
I think there's a difference between sort of standards of work and intended use of Oracle. Like the most obvious example would be malicious software. If you're writing like a crypto locker, that's probably bad. If you're writing a tool which is designed to compromise and intercept encrypted communications, that could be used for good in the case of finding people doing something which is possibly incorrect, or it could be used for bad in terms of tracking down a journalist or a political opponent. Like there's that whole tools and the sliding scale thing. There's a whole
philosophical conversations is an intent, or it isn't.
What's an
like,
example
actually
of
take
what
on.
surveyors were doing that was somehow morally wrong? What were they measuring that they shouldn't have been measuring?
Redrawing property boundaries.
Actual inches.
Yeah.
Also, there was no standard rules, right? So, like before, I mean, like you got to think this is hundreds of years development was old, right? Until they actually came up with a way to regulate the rules were different, right? So even to this point, most of my customers have to take their very, very precise electronic measuring gear to standard ranges within each state. Each state has different ones, and that's the range that says that's a camera, that's 2 kilometers. And unless it's tick that box every 12 months, then there's other ways to do that, but it's a heavy regulated. But yes, there was lots of problems, and there still is a lot of problems because how we measure the land. We essentially give you, if you're my client, I would make sure that your land is bigger than the person I'm not working for. So the issue is, am I working for you, my client, or the society? And that's why it became a regulated industry, because people who were just doing it for private stuff, you just do it because for your client. You don't do it because for other people. It's just like why companies don't contribute to open source, in a way.
I'm going to take this sideways slightly, from surveying to engineering. Now, the reason that engineering, particularly mechanical engineering, is as regulated and as strict as it is today is, I can't remember when it was, but I think it was about 120 years ago, something like that. There was a school explosion in the US, and there was 500 people killed, and it was a boiler that exploded. The whole thing ruptured and everything went up. Now, that's how engineering evolved. A lot of its regulation today. Now, that particular thing, we now do it controlling software. Software controls boilers and all the relief valves and that now.
Yeah.
One difference maybe, software is very flexible compared to hard engineering. So it's very easy to use something in a good or bad way. Whereas an engineering product, it tends to be much more hard outcome, find tough, like you might learn things and things come out on the way.
But doesn't that depend on how small a component is? I mean, for something that like a missile, that's obvious. But if you go down to a small piece of circuitry that's in it,
Or a screw.
Yeah, well, I was going to end up with the bolt. Yeah, you don't know when you make it.
Yeah,
It's going to be
screw in the door in a hospital, or screw in the flip on a bomb. So.
And I'll add something to that as well. To turn it around the other way is because we don't realise we have this power, we don't exercise it. If we realise that, then we can exercise it.
I mean, that could be good in a way. I think, if developers understood the power that they really had, it might be.
Developers will realise this.
Yeah.
I think there's something else to be said. Your example about certain companies having engineers build them methods of invading privacy. For me personally, I can probably criticize that action fairly comfortably. But I think that the more insidious issue would be, let's say we come up with a system like that, and we come up, and it maybe even has what we might consider a valid purpose, but it's open for abuse because it doesn't have controls and processes. And what's going to happen is that there's only so much time to develop so much software, so we'll develop this thing, and the part where we actually develop the software so that it does protect people's private information, that just never gets done.
It's the low profit.
That never gets prioritized because, low profit.
Yeah.
It's, I think, the point here is, I think, well taken, but more insidious is it's not so much the actions, which maybe they're pretty simple to analyze, but the lack of action.
It's not our fault.
I think the big thing here is it's not possible to regulate the software industry. Okay, if you like regulating painters,
The airline industry.
yeah,
Is it red tape?
no, I mean artists. Paint.
That kind of thing.
It's just there's too many. Anyone can go rogue, and how would you know? Type of thing. So
Well, I reckon you could
the other side is
swap
I think
software
what
with
we're not
doctors
really
there.
thinking about
Yeah, I
here
just got people doing
is,
it.
We're rogue painters too. Because we're videos.
is the big thing with is the software that people are developing, which is going AI, and all the great minds are saying, just don't do it, because it's going to be our downfall. Okay, that's the type of thing that's really where we've got concern. Things like Uber and whatever, they were a disruptor. Okay, we were getting ripped off by taxis for years. Okay, but then you have to remember the people that came up with the idea of Uber weren't the coders. Okay, they were some entrepreneur going, hey, this would be a great idea, and they realized they needed developers to do it. Okay, so it's a big difference between saying software developers are the...
So as long as my boss told me to do
Look,
it,
I was just following.
whatever I do is okay.
Oh, I'm not saying-
I was just following orders, you
I'm not
know.
saying that's right. I'm still not saying that's right.
No, exactly.
I've lost millions in my inheritance because of Uber, okay? Because my parents, grandparents, well, sorry, my wife's parents had...
Is it because you invested in it?
No, they got multiple taxi licenses, and they were all inflated to like $500,000 each.
Yep.
They're now worth $30,000. It's just
Plus the
crazy.
government bailout.
So
How are you gonna build that second theatre room, Nigel?
but it's and that makes me sad about it, but at the same time, taxis have been ripping us off for years. Okay, it's just so it's not as though it's something that we didn't need, and so therefore it changed power. Yes, was it the wrong thing to change power?
Well, yeah. Here's the point. It's not whether I'm not trying to argue here that certain software is wrong per se. What I'm trying to argue here is that writing software is a value-laden act. It's an act that has political consequences.
Yep.
So,
And then
I think you could extend it to just say innovation is not a value-free endeavor, because any time that you innovate,
any time there's a change.
it just so happens that software
Innovates
has
so much.
been innovating so much that it has a greater surface area than certain industries which
I
have.
think he may have said that software was eating the world.
I think part of the issue is though, like if you look at other heavy innovation fields like architecture or product design, all that sort of thing, a large part of that training is ethics courses and all the implications of different design and how it impacts sort of people who might be using the product. And that's something which is missing from a lot of it's there in some, but it's not it's not seen as part of core education.
I think it's a case of anything tech industry, because people don't realise, like the CEO thinks he's sending a private email in his company, okay, to the CTO, and they have no idea that the tech department can look at that if they want to. Okay? And it's just one of those things.
Maybe we should have a better CEO.
Like, I heard it here.
That's the case. It's just,
Oh, the law of Australia trumps the law of mathematics.
but lonely, tech guy, they've got access to everything. It's not as though, he's got a private document that he's writing.
Isn't the rule you're not supposed to send anything in an email you don't want other people to read? Because
Yeah.
the whole thing is they can just print it off.
Even if you
Electronic
have
paper trail.
I've seen companies where the CEO says, I just want a private directory that